Okay, let's solve each equation. So these are just a lot of different examples to show you just different situations you're going to have. Make sure you look back at this when you do your homework, your classwork. You're going to hopefully have some time to work in class on this. And I correlated the homework to the notes. So you should be able to use your notes to help you with your homework. Okay, look at what we're trying to do. We need to isolate the x squared here. So that means we want to move the 8. So we want to add 8. So x squared is equal to 8. We want to take the square root of both sides. Remember, when we take the square root, you're going to get x is equal to plus or minus the square root of 8. All right, now from geometry, you learned that you need to break this down. 8 has a perfect square in it. If we think about 8, 8 is the square root of 4 times 2. So the best answer here is going to be plus or minus 2 square root of 2. So when you check this on your calculator, you're going to get a decimal answer. But you can type in 2 square root of 2 and check it with the answer that the calculator gives you. The calculator won't give you that irrational number, but it will give you a decimal approximation of it. Now, for the purposes of our work, leave it as an irrational number. Do not make it a decimal. So your two solutions are negative 2 square root of 2 and positive 2 square root of 2 are your two answers. All right, let's try another one. All right, so underline what you're trying to isolate. Here we're going to isolate the x squared term. So that means the first thing we need to do is subtract 20. So negative x squared is equal to negative 49. Step 2, divide by negative 1. So x squared is equal to positive 49. Take the square root of both sides. We're going to end up with x is equal to plus or minus 7. Don't forget the plus or minus. You must have that. Anytime you write a square root, you're going to get a plus or minus answer. So your two solutions are negative 7 or positive 7. Now here again, you can either graph this to check your answers or use the polynomial solve to check your answers. Once we've gone through the notes, I want you to go back and pick a couple of these to check using the calculator. Make sure you've got the steps. All right, example 3. Notice here we have x squareds on both sides. So this problem's a little bit different. So first thing we need to do here is distribute that 2. So 2x squared minus 10 is equal to negative x squared minus 1. All right, we need to get those x squared terms together. So I'm going to add x squared to both sides. So I'm going to get 3x squared minus 10 equals to negative 1. All right, now let's add 10. So we're going to get 3x squared is equal to 9. Divide by 3. X squared is equal to 3. Square root both sides. So we're going to end up with x is equal to plus or minus the square root of 3. So here again, it's an irrational answer. So our two solutions are negative square root of 3 and positive square root of 3. So when you check your answers here, you're going to get decimal approximations. What was the turkey suspected of? Foul play. Funny. Okay, example 4. Oh, got a fraction there. So let's take care of that first. Our goal is to isolate that x minus 4. So the first thing we're going to need to do is multiply both sides by 3. So we have x minus 4 squared is equal to 33. Take the square root of both sides. We end up with x minus 4 is equal to plus or minus the square root of 33. Move the 4. So our final answer is x equals 4 plus or minus the square root of 33. So our two solutions are 4 plus the square root of 33, 4 minus the square root of 33. Do not give a decimal approximation. Leave it as a rational number. Alright, let's look at example 5. So here my goal is to isolate that x plus 1. So the first thing we need to do, I cannot distribute that negative 2 because that factor is squared. I need to divide by both sides by negative 2. So we're going to get x plus 1 squared is equal to negative 36. Take the square root of both sides. We're going to end up with x plus 1 is equal to plus or minus the square root of negative 36. Alright, we need to simplify this. So x plus 1 is equal to plus or minus, let's think about this, is the square root of 36 times the square root of negative 1. So x plus 1 is equal to plus or minus 6. The square root of negative 1 is I. Alright, we're not done until we get the x by itself. So we need to move the 1. We need to subtract 1. So our final answer is x is equal to negative 1 plus or minus 6i. This is an example of a complex answer. So when you go to check this in your calculator, you want to pick the complex solve tool. Your two answers to this equation are negative 1 plus 6i and negative 1 minus 6i. So we can get integer answers, we can get irrational answers, we can get complex answers with these kind of problems. And if you're not sure what kind of answer you're going to get, graph it. If it doesn't touch the x-axis, then it's going to have a imaginary answer or complex answer. Okay, example 6. Here we need to isolate the x squared term. So the first thing we need to do is subtract 10. So 3x squared is equal to negative 36. Now I need to get the x squared, I'm still going to get the x squared term by itself. So I need to divide both sides by 3. So x squared is equal to, alright, x squared is equal to negative 12. Take the square root of both sides. X is equal to plus or minus the square root of negative 12. Alright, we need to simplify that square root of negative 12. So I'm going to rewrite this as x is equal to plus or minus the square root of 12 times the square root of negative 1. Alright, 12 has a perfect square in it, a 4. So let's rewrite this as plus or minus the square root of 4 times 3 times I, because the square root of negative 1 is equal to I. So our final answer, x is equal to plus or minus, the square root of 4 is 2, the square root of 3 has to stay underneath, and then you're going to have your I. So your two solutions are negative 2 square root of 3i or positive 2 square root of 3i. Here again, if you were to graph this, this would not touch the x-axis. All right, let's look at a different kind of problem. They're asking us, what are the x-intercepts for the function f of x equals x squared minus 2x minus 15? X-intercepts, that's another way of asking for the zeros. All right, so let's start off. Let's see if this thing factors. Is there anything that multiplies to give us negative 15 and has a difference of negative 2? What do we should have? Negative 5 and positive 3. Okay, so we're going to solve this quadratic. So let's factor it. So we want to rewrite that middle term. Group the first two, group the last two. GCF for both of them. So this is going to factor is going to be x plus 3 times x minus 5 equals to 0. So our two solutions use the zero product property. Give you a moment to catch up. So our two solutions are x equals negative 3 or x equals positive 5. Now since they're asking for x-intercepts, those are points. We want to write these as points. So we've got negative 3, 0 and positive 5 zeros. Those are my intercepts. It's where this graph crosses the x-axis. So you can graph this and make sure those are the correct answers. Take the time to check your work. All right, what are the apparent zeros of the function shown in the graph? So that means we're interested in where it crosses the x-axis. So where does it look like it's crossing the x-axis? Here at x equals negative 2, and here again at x equals positive 4. So those are your zeros. Same thing as your x-intercepts. Where it crosses the x-axis is the solution to this quadratic. All right, what is the apparent factors? They're asking for factors here. So here again, we're interested in where it crosses the x-axis. We just got to go one step further. Okay, let's figure out those factors. So what is my 0 first? Where does this cross the x-axis? It crosses at negative 3 and then crosses again at positive 1. Now remember, to get a factor, we want to set this equal to 0. We want to go backwards and figure out what the factor. So here, if we move the 3, we're going to get x plus 3 equals to 0. So x plus 3 is my first factor. So going backwards step. All right, let's do the same thing with this one. Subtract 1, we're going to get x minus 1 equals 0. So your factor is x minus 1. So my two answers here are x plus 3 and x minus 1. So notice the difference between 8 and 9. If it's asking for a 0, you want x equals. If it's asking for a factor, you need to go one step further and turn it back into an expression. So kind of unsolve it. What was the equation that got you x equals negative 3? All right, if there's any other problems that you need to see in more detail, they're included in the flip chart. So just ask the sub to find that particular problem for you. All right, begin working on your worksheet. Whatever you don't finish is going to be for homework. Use your notes to help you complete the worksheet.